Hello, boys. It is your host,
Oh,
KG82 Live, aka the Bald Brawlers. We are back, and I am off the losing streak, and I am joined by my co-host, as always, Mr. Zachariah Earlbeck. Blondie, how we doing today, my man?
I always say it's much easier to do this after a victory. It was a little sweaty on a Monday night against, speak of the devil, why don't you introduce our guest for the day?
I mean, I might as well. I had to send him the text going into Monday night. It was a close matchup, but in the end, Zach pulled off the W and slowed down what was the hottest team in the Yarski before last week. Mr. Axman, it's good to have you on the pod. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing fine. That was kind of bullshit. I think you were scared going into that. You know it. Going into Monday night, that was intense.
And you didn't even mention the fact that Chubb gets COVID in the middle of the week. I mean, it would have been a lot different because you had to start Mike Davis for 1-pointer instead of Nick Chubb. So that obviously that helps a lot too.
I know. When are we gonna be done with COVID? I feel like at some point we have to just be like, you know what? I just saw a thing today did you see that Antonio Brown thing that he was bragging that he had a fake COVID thing? Like nobody's doing this shit. Like just get rid of it. Like who cares if they've got COVID? Right?
I know. It was something surreal. And then they're talking about how there's federal problems with Antonio Brown and all that fun stuff. It's just pure chaos. But with that in mind, I guess I was going to ask you how you think about your team in general, but I wanted to know, last year you were infamous for a lot of your players getting hurt. And one of those players was Saquon. You drafted him again this year. He got hurt again this year. Is there any bitching about it, or are you kind of just content with how your team has kind of gone with in terms of the Saquon pick?
I think the Saquon pick was a mistake, obviously. I'm not going to be picking him going forward. He just every year he seems like he's like the best running back. He's just like this huge guy, but the Giants the Giants just suck so bad that he just they give him the ball 30 times. And if anybody's getting that many touches, you're going to get hurt eventually. So it's just, I don't know if he's actually injury prone, but he's too much of the offense that he's just going to get hurt right away. And the Giants just suck the way it is. So
I agree. Saquon is so tempting because he's so fucking good, but the Giants just blow. So it's like you're looking at him, you're like, God, right. I remember how good he is. Every time he touches the ball, you're like, God, he could just go off every time he touches it. Yeah, and it's just been fluky injury luck the last 2 years. So you kind of got boned twice with that. So
that's the hard thing when you're picking running backs. It's do you go with the best running back, or do you go with a system that is set up well for running backs? You know, it's tough.
One of the toughest philosophical questions. And I guess one of the things that I actually just thought of when we were talking about, because I know Zach had him when Saquon was so good his rookie year. One of the key changes, I think, was having Eli Manning at quarterback as opposed to Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones could actually run the ball, whereas Eli was always dumping it off. So he kind of lost a decent amount of that pass catching work, which kind of hurts the value.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah. You almost need the running backs who are with the quarterbacks who are basically off the cliff. I mean, look at Eli Manning. That guy was toast, and Saquon went crazy. Then you look at last year, Drew Brees. The guy couldn't throw it past 10 yards, so he just dumped it to Kamara every time. And now Ben Roethlisberger is doing the same thing with Najee Harris. So maybe that's the strategy going forward. Look for busted quarterbacks.
I'm almost the opposite on it. I think that it's you want the best offense, so that the run is almost secondary. So you're getting one touch and you're getting 8 to 10 yards because they're doing a draw play. You know, everybody's looking past, and then you run a 10 yard draw every time. That's what I think. Darrell Henderson, he's not better than Saquon Barkley as a player, but he's just in a way better system that he's probably got more value than Saquon, just because he's in a better system, even though he's probably way worse of a player.
So one question we have to ask everybody, and Bilt says we ask this only because I'm looking to trade, but when you look at your team, what's the squad need going forward?
Kirby's really the one that asked me to trade the most. I feel
I texted Zach. Go ahead.
I always say that I'm gonna entertain it, and I never do. I'm like, yep, lay it on me. Let's hear what you got. It's well, the last time that's on you. You wanted to trade me a defense. He's like, would you be willing to trade one of your players for a defense? He's like, oh, you have the Chiefs defense. They got 3 bad matchups in a row. You better get rid of them. It's like, I'm not going to trade for a goddamn defense. Come
Okay,
on.
in my defense, who was I asking for? Your
I don't know.
running back.
You didn't even say. You didn't even say. You just
I said
you,
Hines. I
oh,
wanted to
was
trade
it?
you what was a top 4 defense ranked this week and a good matchup next week for Naeem
I think-
Hines.
But I might need Naeem Hines this week, like if Chubb's going to be out again. So, what's the
Yeah.
deal with that? He's listed as out, but they like have projected points for him this week. Explain that to me.
Yeah, I think it's a whole thing where they just haven't updated the whole thing from the COVID thing. I think he's going to be safe to play, but it's just hard to truly know for sure. So that's part of the interesting part.
Gotcha.
But
Well, because it's weird because like
Yeah.
on my roster it gives him points, but then like matchup it gives him points, but then like right when I go out of it, like my projected total doesn't include his points in there. So it's kind of a weird.
Yeah, I don't know about the whole point thing, but I think the reason he says out is because he's not off the COVID list yet.
He's
Like they have to wait.
As of Thursday, November 17th or whatever, he is out. So it's like
He's on the COVID list, so they have to
Gotcha.
show him as out. But I
Okay.
think is why that's going on.
that could be.
So-
I don't know.
So
It's
that's-
bullshit.
So
We need to just be done with COVID.
basically, what I'm hearing is you don't want any defenses. You're solid on the defensive front.
Dropped the Chiefs, picked up the Raiders. They're playing the Bengals. I think that's going to be good enough for me to beat Ross. So
that's the whole thing. You
Ross-
just take it 1 week at a time. And I think that's the whole thing because I think there's kind of a 3-team logjam where I'm kind of intrigued what's going to happen between you, Pooty, and Ross. And I guess Ross and Kyler. There's 4 teams because now you're all in interdivisional matchups, all one game within each other. So those head-to-head matchups these next few weeks are going to be pivotal for you guys.
How is Ross 6-4? Like, who is on it? His quarterback is Tua. Like, come on.
Well, he
What-
has
he's
Kyler
got-
Murray, who hasn't been hurt.
Oh, that's true. Okay, he's got Kyler Murray. That's right. But who else is on it? Like, he's got no big name players. I don't
Like
get that.
Cordero Patterson and was been the huge
Debo.
guy, but he's been hurt. Debo has been the number 2 or number 3 receiver on the whole year, and Elijah Mitchell the past few weeks has been big for his team, and DeAndre
And then-
Swift. So he's actually got a pretty decent staple, I would say.
And Kelsey's he's the best tight end.
Mm-hmm.
So
Is Kelsey the
I
number
mean-
1 tight end?
yeah.
Oh, he is.
Well,
Oh.
shit, I think. So
Yeah, I'm fairly sure he is.
You look at the names on my team. They just seem like they're better players than Ross's guys. Like Ross seemed to have like just like closed his eyes and picked a team and like gotten lucky this year. Like
So
these guys are scrubs that like just get like seem to luck out each week and like get him wins. I don't get that.
these are major shots, major bulletin board material for Ross going into this week. This is what we need out of the YarskCap.
It seems like that. I don't know. That seems like common sense to me. I don't think that's it. I'm not taking shots. That's just like actually how I feel. It just seems like his players are all terrible and they just seem to play well, like string together like 6 wins. But I mean, his team, it looks significantly worse than mine. So and barring like a catastrophe, I don't see myself losing this week.
That's kind of the calling your shot, shit talking that we haven't quite had this season. I feel like there was more of that last season. Would you agree?
Yes, I think sports gambling is part of it. I think like everybody's like so into sports gambling now that it's like everybody wants that I want that like instant hit. It's like
I was going to ask you about this.
Like I've got the like money on the Patriots tonight. I actually took that Caesars super boost that they have, so I need Mac Jones to have a touchdown. But I think everybody just is so into sports gambling that like fantasy almost like takes a backseat to sports gambling a lot of times. Don't you think?
I was going to ask you that question. Like in the past, fantasy was like all we had, right? Because golf is over, so you really all you did is play fantasy and watch football. But now that there's gambling, you thinking the same thing, like basically fantasy is the backseat and gambling, like that's kind of been the front runner in what's going on.
It sure seems that way, I think, anyways.
I guess I know, and that's one of the interesting. Like everyone has their own little niche, and like my whole thing, like even though I did love doing all the DraftKings and all that kind of gambling stuff, I think fantasy is my first love. That's what I always tend to do, and that's why me and Zach do a freaking weekly podcast, I guess.
See, and I don't like I don't like now like sitting down to watch like an NFL game. Like I need to have money on it, like to be even
I would
remotely
agree.
interested in the game. But fantasy is one thing. Like, even if we had no money on this, I still think that it's like intense. And like, I'll find myself being like, I'll bet on somebody, and then like I'll have like 2 players left. It's like, I don't fucking care about the bet. Like, I just want to win this like matchup. I just score a touchdown. Like, I don't care if it makes my bet lose. Like, I just want to win this match, even though it's worth nothing. It's still like, I want to win this.
I remember when Built and Sap would be like we would be sitting at the bar and their game would be on, and they'd be like, I have to put money on this. What are we going to do? And I'd be like, Jesus Christ, those guys are addicted. And now I totally get it. Every time I'm sitting in front of TV, if the game's on, it's like, there's no point in watching a game I don't have money on.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, it's kind of ruins it, like ruins sports a little bit for you.
I mean, we're kind of pivoting away from fantasy towards sports gambling. I might as well put you on the spots. Is there any go forward bet that are look ahead bets that you have for the people for Saturday or Sunday that you're absolutely love, or you haven't quite got that yet?
No, I'm usually like
week.
I'm usually day of. I usually don't. I really don't look ahead to like games. But what's the Iowa State line? I haven't even seen that.
Iowa State is 3.5 point underdogs. They opened at 4.5 point underdogs.
I don't know. I think we're better. I think we're better.
One of the stats that I liked was when Iowa State is an underdog, I'm pretty sure that the under is on a crazy winning streak. Like, if Iowa State's an underdog going into the game, bet the under for the total points in the game. So if you're not sure one side or another, maybe you just go with the under and then lock that baby in.
I will be betting the under then. That sounds like a lock to me.
Now, what about betting the unders on games you're watching? Because like, I've got the under on the Patriots tonight, and it's tough to watch. You're like basically rooting for nothing to happen. I feel like the under should probably hit way more, but you just nobody likes betting on the under, so it's hard to bet the under on the game you're watching.
Yeah, that's the thing too. I think the under hits the majority of the time. I think that you're better off betting the under because everybody thinks that same way. But I can't get myself to do it. Like, if I'm going to watch the game, I don't want to bet the under. I still do it, but it's like I regret it every time. So it's just it like ruins like 3.5 hours for me. It's just like this is absolutely horrible. Yeah, I hate betting unders, but I still like make the mistake and do it just because I think that it will hit more, even though it probably doesn't.
You know, I'm going to veer us back a little bit towards the fantasy world. And you know what? I'm happy that you've recently went on your win streaks. I think coming out of the draft, you were my second or third favorite team out of everyone in the preseason power rankings, all because of your running backs in the stack with Dak and CD and having Waller. And I guess my general question is, like, thoughts for the rest of the year? Do you have any questions or comments or anything that you want to send out to the rest of the league for people that you have?
Besides Saquon, I think all those guys are solid. Like, I think Waller like started the season hot. That's the thing, is like all the guys, they just haven't put it all everybody, like last week, like the Cowboys guys went off, and then it's like everybody else just like took a shit. It didn't help that like a lot of people were on buys and hurt stuff. But besides Saquon Barkley, I think the rest of the team is solid. I'm just not sold on Saquon yet, but I don't know. The rest of the team is fine. I'm not looking to trade anybody. No trades. I don't need trades.
I feel like you lose some of its luster. So many people have a fun with trade, but you know what? I will give you credit. And I actually got a trade. I actually sent Schultes a trade offer earlier this week, and he sent me a hell of a quote. And I don't know it verbatim, but I was like, God, how does it feel to go a year without trading? It's like, Kirby, I'd rather go a year without trading than a year with making one shitty trade. And so I'm just like, you know what? Kudos. I mean, there's some people in our league that probably could use that. So you could just make that your motto.
That's kind of my mentality too. It's like, that's like the gambling mentality too. It's like, once I like give up on this guy, it's like, he's going to be a star. That's just the way it is. It's like the league is won and lost on draft day. And you just I'm riding with those guys. I firmly believe that you win on draft day. That's the most important day of the year.
As a former league champion, and as I know you yourself as a former league champion, I mean, you're entitled to that opinion. And Zach, you haven't won yet, so no one gives a shit what you think. So I don't know, man. Do you have anything else for Axman before we kind of jump into the rest of the pod, Blondie?
No, I think we hit on the questions I had. I had trades, gambling, Saquon. That was kind of that seems like it hits the high points, doesn't it?
It hit it all. I love that.
Beautiful, beautiful. It's up to you. You want to stay on the rest of them? Or you got to head out and watch the second half of the Patriots?
I think I'm going to head out and watch the second half here, but I'll be listening for this in the morning. So
That's what we love to hear. All right. See you later,
All right.
Snacks.
See you, fellas.
Peace.
All right, Blondie. What are instant reactions from the Axman interview now that we always have people sign off so we can give our immediate reactions right out of here once he's left. What are your initial thoughts, my man?
I mean, the shots at Ross were just fantastic. That's gold right there, man. We need to clip that and send that out. That's awesome. I don't think we've had shots like. I mean, maybe Sapp when he was on, but I don't. Those are probably the biggest shots we've had in a while. I think.
I know it's been a minute because so many times, and I remember saying this earlier. We like always do the thing of conceding to feel like, oh, congrats on the win, even though it's like that. Like that's no fun. I want to freaking bury somebody, and that makes it a lot more fun when people are talking shit instead of conceding defeat. But yeah, I'm happy that because that's the one thing I didn't have was talking about the gambling aspect and all that kind of stuff. And I knew we'd eventually talk about my trade offers I sent him. I think I sent him the Panthers defense for Naeem Hines or whatever. The Panthers have a good matchup the next 2 weeks. And I know Josh plays Built, which is another tough matchup. And thought he'd entertain it. But I mean, I think I've learned I'm just not even going to bother with Axe because I know we talked earlier, like, yeah, you don't even bother with it.
This year, I have made one trade with Axe in the past. But yeah, this year I haven't even sent him a trade offer. So I just assumed that's his mentality. So I'm not even going to bother look. But you did say one thing. I definitely pulled the conceding to the other person. That's my move. So speaking of the devil, I'm going to text Pooty, congrats on the win this week right now. Here.
Shit, while your defense is doing so well, that's a bold move. But Pootie's kicker, that freaking thing, you never fucking know. But hey, I mean, might as well touch base, kind of go through the usual rest of the program. I know we'll touch base quickly on last week's matchups, then the big trade that we had happen this week, and then next week's matchup. So do you have a matchup from last week that you kind of want to highlight?
Yeah, I had Pooty and Luddy as the big game. It did come down to Monday, but to be honest with you, I don't ever think Pooty was really in jeopardy. I think he was okay there. So it wasn't as close as I was expecting. I still think, and you mentioned it in the interview with Axe, the middle of our league is an absolute cluster, and I love it. And then the other thing that kind of crept into my mind this week, do we have a debate for who's at the bottom of the power rankings between Sapp and Jared?
My game I wanted to highlight was how well, because obviously there's ulterior motive for me. I want Bill to lose to get myself a little separation atop. But Jared's team came to frickin' play. I mean, 138 points, high point score of the week. And that's one of the things that I think I like most about our league is that high point scorer gets $10. So Jared, the first week he's eliminated from the playoffs, gets the high score, makes $10 back on his 40, where most teams could just mail it in. He's sitting out there trying to get the high score. And right now I'm thanking my lucky stars that I play Jared next week when Mahomes is on a bye. So thank the good Lord Jesus Christ, and hopefully that makes it a little bit easier on me. So that was the big game that I had highlighted.
Yeah, I know I was doing my power rankings earlier, and I stared at Sapp and Jared at the bottom, trying to decide which one I had at the bottom. We'll have to we'll reveal that later in the show, but I definitely had to think about it. Pooty texted me. I'll read it live on the show. He said, "I'm not even going to entertain this comment."
I know. He texted me earlier. He's like, you know what? Like, obviously, he still had the Rams on bye, which is hard because he has so many high-quality Rams players. But even with his Rams players, it's difficult beating your team, knowing how good it is week in, week out. So he's like, if they're going to be on bye, make it against Zach so he can have his full squad whenever he's playing Josh and Ross in the coming weeks. So I thought that was an interesting way of looking at it, and I definitely don't mind it because if he sweeps those two with the LA Rams, he'll be sitting pretty good for the playoffs.
Yeah, I guess I didn't think about that, but like the question was always like, okay, if you could choose, would you take all of your players on 1 week and have them all have the bye the same week, or would you have them scattered throughout? And I think it's like just punt the 1 week and then you have your full squad the rest of the time instead of trying to piece it together. So I didn't think about that, but it actually does make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you never know. I mean, we saw big upsets last week, and Pootie's kicker's having himself a freaking day. So maybe he can pull off the upset this week. But so long as he handles his business the rest of the year, everything will drop into place. But I know we touched base briefly on Jared, so I feel like we got to touch space. And what I thought was even more fun was the fact that Jared and Sapp are playing each other this week, and so that adds a little spice to it. And so Jared got Devontae Adams, what many considered a top 2 receiver consensus, and then Sapp got Damian Harris and George Kittle. So Sapp, I think he's had Kittle before, traded him away, and now he's got him back again. It's just a huge roller coaster. And so, what were your general thoughts with that deal?
Kittle has to be the most traded player. So I was curious. So I did a little investigative journalism here, and I texted Sapp and I texted Jared for their comments on the show. So Sapp said, I said, seeing if I could get a comment on your recent trade for this week's YarskCap. Sapp said, yes, I need a strong team. Oh, Jesus, speak of the devil, we just had a trade go down live on the show.
Oh, shit.
Did you push that or did he push it?
Oh, shit. We had an accepted offer. I told you I had a trade offer for Luddy, but let's wait a little bit and then we can
Okay,
dive into that.
Let me read Sapp and Jared's comments here. Sapp said, yes, I need a strong team from top to bottom. I know if I want to make the playoffs, I got to figure out my tight end position. So I snuck into Jared's messages this morning. Harris and Kittle together make my team stronger than a lonely Adams. And Curb can stop harassing me with trades for Adams every day. It's a win-win. So that was Sapp's comments, which I thought was interesting because to me that meant Sapp was reaching out to Jared for the trade. So then I asked Jared the same question. He said, yes, sir, Beats by Ray and I have developed quite a relationship this last season regarding trades. While he struggles with some of his tactics, it usually works out for the both of us. I was a little hesitant for this trade because he is my opponent this week, which is I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, trading with your opponent. But it was an offer I couldn't pass up. To be honest, I was not expecting Adams. I was looking to grab Foreman so I could have some depth at running back. When I looked at my roster, I saw a glaring issue after Robert Woods got hurt and felt like I needed to improve that position, and he offered Adams. I couldn't pass it up. So Sapp offered Adams. I thought that was probably the most interesting piece. Sapp is basically offering his best player. That was my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, and I've been after Adams, obviously, he knows for a while, and I've tried to always flare the Tony Pollard, you need to insure him. So I'd offer some wide receivers to go with Tony Pollard, but Sapp held strong, and I think this is one of the more even trades considering the big names that were out there. I think Jared got the best player, obviously, with the 2-for-1. The person getting the 1 is getting the best player. But getting Kittle, and I think it all is a good tight end now that he's healthy. And I think this whole trade kind of hinges on Damian Harris the rest of the year. He's had some very good weeks. Last week he was out for COVID, and Ramondre Stevenson had himself a hell of a week. And so you wonder if he's going to bite into his workload at all. I haven't been able to watch the game at all tonight, so I haven't been able to follow it too closely. But it'll just be, I think this trade is pretty much contingent on how Harris does the rest of the year to truly determine who the winner is. But more times than not, I think if you get the best player in a 2-for-1, that's typically the side that I would kind of lean on. But it's an interesting aspect with them playing head to head. Jared, obviously, it doesn't matter as much because he knows he's in the Sacco, but Sapp is somewhat trying to fight for that last playoff spot. But I think the matchup this week could determine who's last in next week's power rankings. But that's a little teaser for what's to come, I guess.
It is. And one more comment from Jared. He said, please remind the rest of the league that, as of now, I am, in all caps, not looking to trade Adams. So something for the rest of the league to to be aware of.
And may the record show, I laugh at Sapp if he thinks I'm going to stop sending him offers that include Tony Pollard. Now I'm just going after someone else on his team. But so yeah, we also have another trade that went through, and I made a blockbuster. I traded the RB1 in fantasy football.
And so the way you look at it, Austin Eckler isn't as much of a downgrade as Jonathan Taylor, and Deontay Johnson is a target hog and has a good schedule for the playoffs. So I was trying to acquire Deontay Johnson too. So we both obviously had our eyes set on Deontay Johnson this week. So yeah, I would say a good trade again, probably for both of you. I think, Kyler gets the number one running back, so it's hard to say someone doesn't do well if they get the number one running back. And I know Kyler has wide receiver depth with Marquise Brown if he's playing, and
Tyler Lockett.
And he has Tyler Lockett and he has Tyreek Hill.
Yep. So he's got plenty of depth at the wide receiver spot. And another part that I kind of looked at was so right now, obviously, my team struggled ever since Henry got hurt. Jonathan Taylor's been a blessing, but I think there's a decent chance that my last week matchup with Bill is going to decide who potentially gets that 1 week bye. And that's the same week that Jonathan Taylor has a bye. And so I saw Eckler, he's passed his bye. Deontay Johnson has passed his bye, and Jerry Jeudy and Jonathan Taylor both still have their byes to come. So potentially I'm getting 2 free weeks out of them. I'm slowly losing on Jonathan Taylor's value, I think, because even though he has the bye, he is the 101 running back right now, it seems like. He's just catching the ball, doing big runs. So it's hard to part with him, but I also traded for DJ Moore, who's struggled ever since I got him, and my wide receiver 2 and 3 spot has been struggling. So even getting a consistent wide receiver 2 and Deontay, and then just alternating between Waddle and DJ Moore as my wide receiver 3. And number 1, I got my bald guy back. I've been the Eckler guy the last 2 years, and I just randomly thought of it today, and I was like, God, I want that deal. And I texted Kyler right when the Thursday night game starts, like, Kyler, I got a big offer for you. Let me know what your thoughts are. If you like it, let me know, and I'll tell you when to click accept so we can break it down on the pod.
That's awesome. Yeah. Obviously you steal 2 weeks with the bye, with those guys being passer buys, and Kyler looks like he's sitting pretty good to make the playoffs. So sometimes you can take that gamble a little bit too to acquire the number 1 running back. So yeah, I would say both, especially Kyler with his wide receiver option. So I think probably a win-win trade as of right now. Quick reaction. So
Kyler could have the number 1 running back and the number 1 wide receiver for the rest of the year with Tyreek Hill and Jonathan Taylor. And so there's potential. And then the Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett stack, he could be a team of destiny with all these big horses. It just kind of comes down to what the last weeks of the year. And I played Kyler this week, so I was okay with giving away Jeudy because he's on his bye this week, meanwhile, I can play Deontay against him. So fingers crossed Deontay makes him pay for it, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I almost have like a won't trade with my opponent just out of sheer principle, kind of like cardinal rule, just because I'd hate to stare across and look at Deontay Johnson. I don't know.
I'm looking across Jonathan Taylor. That's a lot scarier.
Jonathan Taylor plays the Bills, so that probably helps a little bit. But
yeah, I saw Derrick Henry run through the Bills when I played my co-host that week. Yeah, I remember that. But you know what?
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? That's the beauty of it. We got a few trades. Me and Kyler's second trade of the year, and the first trade was kind of blah between us because both Lockett and Edmonds haven't done anything. Neither has DJ Moore, so I consider that a wash. So we'll see what happens with this next one. But with that in mind, I think we got to dive into our power rankings and kind of go from there, man. So I will share the screen. Let me know when you can see it, and we can dive in.
Yeah. So keep in mind these were done before the trade that you just clicked accept. So I don't know how much of a I don't think that that's a big a swing, but just keep in mind that was done. These were done prior to that. So at the bottom, again, we've already alluded to it. I had a real soul searching moment trying to decide whether I could upgrade Jared over Sapp this week. I mean, Sapp's on a 5-game losing streak. Just trades away his best player, but as of right now, I still have Jared in the 10 spot, and I've got Sapp in the 9 spot. So they obviously play each other this week, and I think I'm just going to let that decide who's at the bottom. So we're just going to let fate decide and let those two duke it out for the bottom there. So that'll be an interesting, fun one to watch. With the 8 spot, I got Schultes. He's on a 3-game losing skid. Doesn't sound like Kamara is going to play this week. And then if you look at the schedule, it goes Tino, Sapp, Kirby, Jared. So not exactly murderer's row, but he's got a pretty much he's got to start winning soon because otherwise he's at risk of missing the playoffs. So I've got Schultes at 4-6 in the 8th spot, and then just missing out, I've got Axe, who just had his 4-game winning streak snapped. Close loss on Monday. He should get Saquon and Chubb back. I'm just a little worried that those early season losses might have been too big of a mountain to overcome. So I got Axe as of right now, just on the outside looking in. And again, part of that too is the tough schedule he's got coming up. He's got Roth, Tino, Pooty, and Luddy, who as of right, you can see not in the bottom 4. So he's got 4 of the top 6 teams left on the schedule. So tough road left for Axe to get there. So
yeah, I think Axe is
anything different there.
So I think the bottom 3 are kind of clear cut. I'll say it now that the matchup between Sap and Jared will decide the 10 spot next week. I mean, that is the lock of the century. I know these are yours, but I'm willing to put decent money on that to stick with the gambling theme. Schultes, I think he's in the number 8 spot, not necessarily because his team is weak, but it's just he's had some difficult time with his receivers. Adam Thielen's kind of been hit or miss. Mike Williams, the last 3 or 4 weeks, he's been completely off. And DeAndre Hopkins has been hurt, and Kamara, like you said, has been hurt. So I think the bottom 3 are kind of set in stone, especially with Schultes having a good team compared to Sapp, I think, but having 6 losses already, it makes it a lot tougher. So I think the toughest part is the top 7, I think is really close. I guess I really don't necessarily have a problem with where you put any of them. I think with the 2 5-5 teams, I guess I don't know how many 3 5-5 teams, but my least favorite of the 3, I think, would be Axe, unfortunately. But it's just because I like how well-rounded Pootie's team is, and built. He's got CMC, but I think it's a matchup, at least for me. I think it's between Pootie and Axe, just because I think Pootie's almost a lock to lose this week, and so he's really looking at a 3-week season as opposed to 4. So that's just my 2 cents.
You're saying Pootie's a lock to lose this week?
Solely because of
for me if
Bipocalypse. I mean, Broncos and Rams on bye, and so that's quarterback, wide receiver, 2 running backs. Or are the Broncos on a bye? Yeah, they are.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, Cup's been so good. Pootie should just start Cup out of solidarity for how good that Cup has been these past couple weeks. That's kind of my thoughts. So,
yeah.
Anyways, we'll keep rolling here. Again, we're splitting hairs in the middle here, right? It's tough to determine. So you might not agree with this, but I still got you at the 6th spot here. Uh-oh. Mac Jones threw a pick?
Yeah.
Oh, hate that. Okay. So you got off the slide last week, but it was against Sap. So, how much credit do we give for that victory? You make a big trade this week, but there's a big game going in this week. So kind of similar to what I did with Sap and Jared, I've got you and Luddy back to back in the rankings, and I'm just going to let you guys duke it out, and we'll solve it from there. So like for your schedule, I wanted to point out you've got Luddy, then Jared, Schultes, and then Tino. So obviously between you and Luddy, whoever wins this game will feel much better at 7-4 than whoever loses at 6-5. So I'm just going to leave you 2 neck and neck, let you guys decide. So that means I've got Pootie at the 4 spot. Now, it sounds like you would have had him a little bit lower, but he's on 3 straight wins, most points in the league, and he's got straight up wins over you and Luddy in the last 2 weeks. So I've got Pootie at the 4 spot. Anything you do differently in the middle?
So, I mean, maybe selfishly, but since King Henry has been out the last 2 weeks, I've scored the 3rd most points both of the last 2 weeks. So I think I would actually move myself up to the number 4 slot. And Pootie, I think his team is better than mine, but if these are just a projection of where the rest of season is going to be, Pootie, I think, is relatively safe, I would say, to potentially go into it 5-6. And so if he was to potentially go 2-1 in his last 3 games, that's a 7-7 overall record. And so it's not so much that I think Pootie's team is better than mine. I just think it's more of a reflection of I have a 1-game lead, and he's now dealing with Apocalypse this week, playing presumably the number 1 team in the YarskCap rating. So that's kind of my twofold of why I have Pootie below me. It's not necessarily a reflection of whose team is better, but who's going to finish higher in the standings.
Yep. And for reference, so Pootie gets me this week, then he gets Ross, then he gets Axe and Sap. So it gives you an idea who he'll have down the stretch there. So that's where we're at in the middle. Again, like I said at the very top of the show, the middle is a log jam. It has been all year. So we're kind of splitting hairs. Now I know Ross's team has kind of gotten poo-pooed. Axe was taking shots, but he just scored 132 points. He's 6-4, and he's been doing this without Kyler Murray. So I've got Ross at the 3 spot, and he gets Axman this week, then Pootie, then Luddy, then Earlbeck. So between me, Luddy, and Ross, we will be shooting for that bye week coming down the stretch. So that's going to be a fun race to watch. Now, I've got Built at the 2 seed. Now, 5-5 and off a loss to Jared. What is he still doing at the 2 slot? I still like the team. And listen to this. Down the stretch, he gets Schultes this week, then Axman, then Sap, and then obviously you in the last week. So probably the softest schedule out of anyone that I had looked at for the last. So as far as bye positioning, I think his schedule is a little softer. But like you said, you do have you have almost a 2-game lead on him, right? Because you beat him head-to-head the first game.
But we still have one more matchup. So
right.
if I lose to him, it'll come down to total point score, where I have a slight lead, but not enough over the next 4 weeks, where I still need to pretty much be scoring in order to keep up.
Right, but you have your record's 6-4, his record's 5-5, so you almost have a two-game
1.5
lead, right?
technically, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So again, I like his squad. We're getting down to the ending where we should start maybe predicting the bye weeks a little bit. So Bill does have the easy schedule, and I think that will he really dropped the ball coming off that loss with Jared, so that definitely hurt. And then on top, I've got myself at 7-3, coming off a sweaty Monday night victory. Diggs kind of carried me this week, and I've got Pootie, then Luddy, Jared, and then Ross. And I think that last game with Ross is going to be huge in determining the bye. So that's the top 3. Kirby, what say ye?
Yeah, I think the interesting team was and the biggest question mark is with Ross's team, when is Kyler Murray going to come back? Because he has been getting by without him, but the last 2 weeks have seen really low scores all across the league. We haven't seen a whole bunch of teams breaking 100, which is a little abnormal. And I don't think that trend's going to continue. And he's rolling with 2 this week against the Jets, which is obviously a good matchup. And I think he's got a fair matchup next week, but it's just going to be interesting and kind of a look ahead right now. But I'm kind of circling the matchup next week between Ross and Pootie and seeing how that one's potentially going to weigh out, because I think that potentially could have some pretty decent playoff implications right there. So overall, and Bill, despite being 5-5 at the number 2 slot, I think I like just because the CMC factor. He played, I think, 60% of snaps last week, didn't score a touchdown, and still got 22 points. I mean, he gets 9-10 catches in his sleep, and he's just something else, along with Najee Harris, who has been a top 12 fantasy running back every week but 2 weeks. So despite him losing to Jared had a smorgasbord week from the Chiefs, which sometimes you just can't beat, but I still think he's entitled to 2. And your team is number 1. I mean, it has been for a while. You lose Aaron Jones, but you still have the handcuff and A.J. Dillon, which we've kind of preached on getting those high-value handcuffs, and A.J. Dillon was definitely one of them. So despite Aaron Jones being down, your team's not going to miss a beat while he's gone. So I think it's pretty locked and voted for the top 3.
So that's the week 11 power rankings, baby.
Beautiful. But hey, let's just finish it up. And I mean, we probably already had the interview, so we're not going to do the whole comparison to Fantasy Pros. Maybe we'll save that for next week. But let's just finish it up on the highlighted week matchups that we got for next week, and then we can focus on watching the Patriots Falcons because that's what's important, man.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of touched on Jared Sapp. I think that one's just going to be fun to watch. We'll get to decide who's at the bottom. But for the matchup that I'm really watching, I'm watching you and Luddy, and it's even more interesting now that there's been a trade. But like I said, I think this one's going to be important in the playoffs. Whoever wins is going to be 7-4, feeling pretty good, and whoever loses is going to be 6-5, is going to have to sweat out the last 3 weeks of the year. So, you know, is Lamar Jackson playing? Luddy started Matt Ryan. That's obviously a big deal. I don't know if Marquise Brown is going to play. So, and then you add the trade intrigue. So that one for me has got to be the game of the week, no doubt about it.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, fingers crossed. So far, Matt Ryan hasn't done too well. I saw there was a 4th down play, and hopefully they didn't convert it. We'll see what's going to happen. I think it's going to review. But the matchup that I kind of had highlighted was, and it just put even more gasoline on it, was between Josh and Ross. I mean, 5-5 or 6-4, and tiebreakers are going to be monumental. I don't know who won the head-to-head, but Ross potentially could separate himself, and we've always talked like, hey, you need to at least get to that 7-win mark, but potentially you might need 8 in order to get to the playoffs. So if Ross can pull off the win this week versus Axe, he all of a sudden gets to that 7-win mark. And Axe's team at 5-5, if he's to lose, I mean, he's potentially losing ground on the rest of the field. So it'll be very interesting. Axe put a little bit of gasoline on the fire, but I also don't mind his chances when he's seeing that Dak and CD are playing against Kansas City. So I really think this matchup is going to come down to how Tua plays at quarterback, and we'll kind of go from there because Ross can't have another stinker from his QB1 position.
Right. It's going to be that one. You're right. It's going to be another fun one that I think comes down to Monday night with Saquon, and Ross has Godwin. So it's going to be one that we get to watch. Somebody's going to have to be sweating Monday night, I'm guessing. And I did peek, and Ross beat Axe in Axe's early losing skid. So Ross right now does have the tiebreaker right now head to head. So.
Yep. So that'll be big. But you know what? I mean, that's what makes it fun. These are now the dog days. I think we're 4 weeks left in the regular season. Is that right?
Yes, 4 weeks left and then the playoffs.
Yep. So I don't know. Like next week, I mean, we still have the power rankings, but at some point we got to do the playoff prediction and officially lock in what we think the final playoffs are going to be. And it's coming time. I mean, we're approaching the trade deadline, so pretty soon we're not going to have any big trades to discuss. And next week is Thanksgiving week, so hopefully we can get together. I know I'll be down in Texas with some of Katie's family, but hopefully we can carve out some time and make it all work because we got to give the people what they want, man.
We'll have to figure something out. I've got an idea for next week that I think is going to be kind of fun. So we'll see if we can make it work.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. But hey, we've already missed the whole entire third quarter, so we need to get our ass watching that. But with that, everybody, everyone have a very successful week, except unless your name is Kyler. And hey, you know what? Cycle's got a big game this week. Fuck the Sooners. All right, later, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Peace.